presentation will run for about an hour, and we do have a dedicated Q&A session towards the end. Everyone is muted, so please send in your questions through the question function in the webinar controls. If you are having any audio issues, please try using the phone call option if you're using the computer speakers, or try restarting the webinar. Today's webinar is being recorded and we'll be sending out a follow-up email that includes the recording and slides. So let me give you a very quick background on the Washington Student Achievement Council. We are the state agency in the state of Washington that works on higher education issues across almost anything and everything you can think of, with a particular emphasis on helping underserved students, whether they're traditional aged or adults, have equal opportunity for access and success in higher education. We have a strategic framework in which we base this on our efforts, like many states, to increase the educational level of our state population. And our strategic framework embraces the 4 strategic pillars of affordability, enrollment, increasing enrollment, completion, student success, and student supports. And student supports refers to helping students across a wide array of non-educational challenges, such as housing, food security, transportation, childcare, mental and other health issues, crisis intervention that can get in the way of academic success. Because we do believe if we build an affordable and supportive educational environment, more Washington residents will enroll in and succeed in post-secondary education to achieve their goals in life. So thank you very much for coming to our webinar. This is an outgrowth of our Pave the Way conference, which is an annual gathering of 400 to 500 educators throughout the state of Washington talking about these issues and how to increase student success. And so we're happy to sort of participate in rolling this out through other channels in the conference itself. And now let me turn it over to Becky, who will take you into the substantive elements of the webinar.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Mike, and it's a pleasure to be here with everyone. I'm very excited to be on this webinar today. It's a topic that is really important as we think about really paving pathways that are successful for our students. And I wanted to begin with the first slide to show you a map of NACCE and talk just briefly about what we are doing. So if we can go to the first slide here. NACCE has a membership of over 340 colleges and universities, with a growing group of historically Black colleges and universities and minority-serving institutions, with over 2,000 engaged professionals reaching 3.3 million students. So we are very pleased to partner with Vida Navis, and you can see in the photograph Dr. Dillard, who is the president of Shaw University. We're working collaboratively on a number of things that are going to be discussed today at the panel. So if you go to the next slide, wanted to share with everyone that may not be aware of what NACCE does is we are a connector and a co-creator. So what we do is we try to look across the landscape in terms of some of the challenges and problems, and then we partner with organizations like Vida Navis and Myers-Briggs and many, many others to try to connect the dots in the ecosystem. Simply put, our mission is to provide leadership and sustainable, scalable resources to foster entrepreneurial thinking in North America. So you can see on the graphic there, what we do is we do a lot of professional development among college leadership and faculty. We partner with industry and corporations to try to make sure that our college partners are exposed and educated on platforms that can help them achieve their goals, which is what we're doing today. We do quite a bit with policymakers, informing them on what the needs are and offering suggestions on solutions. And you can see our little graphic to the right are some of our board members and college presidents that are engaged in the conversation. So if we go to the next slide, I wanted to just touch briefly on the alignment with mission. This webinar in particular, as Mike stated, focusing on equity, inclusion, and student success is a key part of our mission. So when we look at how NACCE views this, we're looking at promoting and fostering equity, inclusion, and diversity through tools and resources that provide insight and a path forward to help not only students, but especially counselors to really give more informed instructions. We also know that the ratio from counselors to students is very high across the nation. I think it's one counselor to over 430 students. So you can see how not only assessment, but really innovative approaches like peer mentoring can make a really big difference in this space. I wanted to just share with you briefly, you see a slide there of a program that NACCE partners with one of our foundation partners through over 50 community colleges and HBCUs. Each year we're serving now over 4,000 young men of color and young women from rural areas that are middle schoolers on college campuses. So we're teaching them about STEM, and part of what they're working on is really getting an assessment of what are their interests, what are their skills, and what we do is try to promote those things out. There's a lot of research that's been done in this area, and we're looking forward in the future to including some built-out aspects of assessment, which we're going to get into today. So at this point, I think what we're going to do is to dive into the panel. So we've got our panelists that you can see on the screen who are really energetic, engaged panelists from the state of Washington who are doing really impactful work. So as we sort of go through some of this conversation, when we start here, I think what we can do is have people maybe share a little bit about their background and what they do, because they are the ones on the ground that are coming up with innovative solutions. How do you get over the fact that we have just historically, and we know from the data, a limited number of counselors and a large number of students? So let's start with looking at the state of Washington. Mike kind of painted the landscape, so it's exciting for us at NACCE because we work with all 50 states, and we look to the state of Washington as really being a leader in many ways. And we know from the data that it has a challenge that they're working to address, and that is the lowest rates of high schoolers continuing on to post-secondary. So let's start with Julie and Danny. Maybe Julie can go first and then Danny. So tell us just a bit about your background, and we'd love for you to share some experiences and guiding principles that help you address the populations you work with. So Julie, if you want to start, you know, kind of exploring that question.
Sure, thanks. Thanks, Rebecca. And actually, I may have Danny go first. We collaborated earlier this week. And Danny, if it's okay, if I have you take the lead on that, and I can come in and complement that. Would that be okay?
Yes. And can we go to the next slide, please? So welcome, everyone. My name is Danny Trimble, and I'm from Lower Columbia College, which is a community college here in Washington State. So we have 34 community and technical colleges within the state of Washington. And as part of our system, our state board has developed part of their vision statement is this idea of, and it's not just an idea, it is a very strong proclamation of leading with racial equity. And so as we thought about what we wanted to share today, I want to share some data and kind of dig into what we're doing here as a state, but I really want to emphasize that this really is the why of what we are doing. So when we are looking particularly through this mindset of leading with equity, particularly around racial equity, we wanted to really examine what is happening in our state. And I think that as we begin to share our perspectives from the college level, this kind of need for developing more support and increasing access is really the driver of what we are doing. So I'm going to share a little bit of data. So the screen that you can see right now, it does have a lot of information, but I want to kind of point out two things. The first is if you look at the little green bar, as well as the darker blue bar, you can see that those are representing completions and students who transfer. So across the board, regardless of race and ethnicity, those are both fairly low. And so that is something that I wanted to highlight, is that that's really where we're starting. That's not unusual for really any of community and technical colleges in our country, but just recognizing that our rates of completion and where students are transferring, you can see on this graph that there are still, many of those students might still be enrolled, but recognizing that that is one huge element that we are trying to address is completion and moving students into a pathway towards a 4-year degree if that's what they choose. Can we go to the next slide, please? One of the real reasons, so I wanted to highlight this statistic because I think it's pretty powerful, and this was one piece of data that I think speaks really to why re-looking at what are our outcomes around equity, particularly around race and ethnicity, are so incredibly important. So looking at this statistic of within Washington State, around 47% of our students, all students, drop out after 1 year. That's nearly half of our students. But if you look at particularly African American, Native American, and Pacific Islander students, that is nearly 10 points higher. So when we looked at some of this data, not just as a state, but individually as college systems, and that data is different depending on what college you might represent, really just thinking around, this is just straight out of the gate, right? This is without looking at why. So if you go to the next slide, it really kind of led, and some of this research was led by the Community College Research Center, which is housed through Columbia University. And so this led to this question of why are students dropping out? And so thinking around that, and particularly since we're going to be talking about some themes today around how students are choosing what programs they would like to go into as they're choosing, what their path might look like. This idea of how many of our students are completely undecided. And unsurprisingly, I should say, it is fairly high. So within the state of Washington, it's about 35% of first-year students are in a program that is completely unknown. So they are saying, I have no idea what I would like to do. If you look at this a little bit differently, up to 53% of students who identify as Hispanic or Latino are also in an undeclared or unknown program. So there definitely are some gaps here where we know that having clarity is incredibly important, particularly at the beginning of a student's college career, and it will help them, have the motivation and the support that they need to actually move through their program. So some of this is fairly troubling when we looked at the data. And then the last piece to that around thinking around undecided students is that within our state, about 20% of all students switch their program within the first 2 years. So, we know that if you start off on one path and move to another, you're at risk of, losing a lot of momentum. Can we go to the next slide, please? And so the last piece that I'd like to highlight is this idea, particularly in Washington, this may be true for other states as well. We do have a lot of students who do just a general studies transfer-oriented program. And for many years, that was, the path that was recommended for students was, you don't necessarily know what you would like to do at our colleges, that's fine. Get this degree and you'll figure it out when you transfer and go to a university. However, when you look at the data, we find that that's not actually really happening for a few reasons. The first is around a little over 40%, so 42% of our students don't actually finish a transfer degree, which means that they don't actually go on and transfer to that university. So along with that, our state board has done a lot of research that has found that the outcomes for students who complete those 2-year transfer degrees and then do not earn a bachelor's degree, their employment outcomes are either the same or in some cases worse than someone who might not have even gone to college. So when we look at that, that's where that 74% statistic comes in, is that 74% of students who have this transfer degree are effectively in what our state is classifying as a low value degree. So, you know, essentially you're going to school for 2 years, 2 or potentially more years, earning a degree and not having much wage progression at the end of it. So as we looked at this data, and I'm going to kind of lead into Julie, I think that what became incredibly important for not just our state, but I think our individual colleges, is looking at where are these equity gaps, and not just looking necessarily at the data, but at the why. Why is this happening? What are the underlying causes? And I think that frames really well what we're going to be talking about today. That's great. Thank you so much, Danny. And, you know, an additional area which Julie's going to get into and share with us a bit about, as you said, equity and access, is really the importance of, you know, the population that community colleges serve tend to be a lower socioeconomic level, higher age. Many of them are single parents. So one of the problems that we look to try to wrestle with and solve is that you could have someone going into a community college and amassing debt, assuming that they didn't have Pell paying for that. So that experience could actually end up putting them in a worse position, which is exactly where higher education does not want to go. So, so Julie, kind of chime in, and you're doing a lot of excellent work. So talk to us about equity and access, and you've got some good data to share.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rebecca. And Danny, thank you very much. Hello, everyone. This is Julie Lankor. I'm at Clover Park Technical College and here in Lakewood, Washington. And Danny, I appreciate the setup, kind of looking at the state information. And I'm going to take this opportunity to kind of zero that lens in a little bit. The chart you see on the screen, this was something that was presented at one of our current employment services councils for the state, and was really kind of a piece of information that I brought back to my community. And taking a look, Danny shared some great information about our students who are pursuing transfer degrees. Here at Clover Park and at many of our technical colleges, students are pursuing a technical degree focused on finishing that degree and getting out into the workforce. And so this particular slide really kind of struck home, taking a look at, you know, looking at preparing students for work, and then taking a look where there are still some significant achievement gaps and our students within the programs that they're selecting, and then those outcomes, and really taking a look, especially at our students who are identifying as Black or African American, our students identifying as Hispanic, and our Alaska Native American students, really looking at choosing programs that actually were lower wage tier programs than their Asian and white peers. And so this was something I brought back to Clover Park and taking a look with our guided pathways teams and talking about how we're taking this equity and access work and how are we addressing this. And one of the things that certainly became clear to us, kind of coupled with this, was looking at intergenerational poverty. This was something, we are in a relatively high poverty community. About 19% of our community is in poverty. About 30% of our children are living in poverty right here in our local area. And so kind of taking a look at how sort of this kind of inherited poverty, kind of the socioeconomic challenges of someone's background and of their parents can kind of continue on. Coupled with, we also have taken a look at some of the research at looking at implicit bias in career exploration and selection. We really had a sense in kind of reflecting that our students were already kind of coming to us with some preconceptions. And a lot of times some of those preconceptions took them directly into some of their lower tier wage programs. Just a little bit of context for folks here at Clover Park. We have a head count, probably almost 5,200 students. The median age of our students is 29. 46% of our students identify as students of color. We have almost 45% receiving need-based aid, and at least a third of our students are parents. So that kind of gives you a sense of where our students are at. And so going through the data that we had here on campus, looking at the data we were coming from the state, and kind of reaffirming that we have an obligation to our underrepresented students to make sure we're providing awareness of what all programs are available. And kind of taking a look, that idea of implicit bias, I know that can be kind of a tough one to kind of wrap our brains around when we're working as counselors or working, directly with students. And one of the immediate ones comes to mind is a lot of times we have students coming in saying, I really like to work with my hands, I really want to work on engines. And it's like, okay, great, I'm going to go into automotive tech, which is a great field. We're always going to be driving cars. We need people in that field. But I was finding is we weren't necessarily having that continued conversation because we have an aviation maintenance technician program here. We actually have an entire airport on our campus where students, can pursue similar types of work as they would in auto technician, but they could also then take a look at how does it look in aviation maintenance and working on helicopters and planes. Again, just that whole idea of students maybe not being aware of what they don't know and the responsibilities we have to really help them out with their program selection. And I do have some more, if we could go to the next slide and kind of, again, taking this out, looking at Clover Park, a little bit about us for program selection. A couple of things that we wanted to do is really affirming career choice and exploring exploration at the same time for our students. One piece of data that was interesting, it was the 2018, I think they call it the Sensei survey. Like 90% of our students reported that they already knew what program that they wanted to enroll in when they showed up on our campus. And I definitely understand that that is not common probably for many of you who are listening to this webinar. But it was a piece of data that we had, but we also wanted to continue to explore that. What we have right now and what we've been implementing to kind of address these issues of equity access. All of our students coming in come to our Welcome Center. You can see a photo of it there. And this is a one-stop place. This is where students are going to start their programs, do admissions, financial aid, their academic placement testing. They're going to enroll in there for their first classes. And now all of our students have the option to take the Super Strong Interest Assessment through the Vita Navis platform right here. And once they complete that, they meet directly with a one-on-one entry coordinator. And a lot of our work was wanting to affirm what students were already coming in with. And then for our students who aren't sure, help them continue the exploration and have something that can connect directly with our programs and help them have a larger understanding of what they were doing there. It's not mandatory. Right now for all our students, we have some other ways we're integrating the Vita Navis platform where this does touch all students. But just as a way of getting started, we kind of, again, looking at our data, our guided pathways, drive and purpose there, and then kind of coming together and really focusing on that program selection choice as students are coming in.
That's great, Julie. And one of the things I wanted to point out too is on your data of low-wage jobs, and that was my experience working at a community college overseeing career services, that a lot of our students, you mentioned 29, I think the national average is 28, so yours are a little bit older, but that students could take the assessment and gravitate towards some of these low or medium wage careers. One of the things that we've been exploring through NACCE, through states across the country and in partnership with corporate partners is how might we infuse, entrepreneurial mindset and really the option for students if they really are passionate and they determine that that is the result of their assessment, but how they might work to think about creating a business. So if it's somebody who gravitates toward childcare, perhaps instead of going into a profession where they're not going to probably even be able to pay off their student debt, that they can think of different alternate career pathways. And that's kind of why we're excited about some of the conversation and some of the ways to utilize the assessment nationally. But it's great. And you touched on a little bit of students who are struggling to stay in school, but also, Edie, why don't you speak about recruiting and enrollment and some of, your challenges and commitments. You perhaps have some information that you would like to share related to interest. So if you want to jump in and share, that would be wonderful.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. This is Edie Blakely. I'm the Director of Career Services at Clark College. We're in Vancouver, Washington. And so we're in the lowest southeast corner of the state and very connected to Portland Metro, but our students don't tend to cross that river. So I do want to talk just a couple of points. I think many of the colleges in Washington are now struggling with enrollment, lowered enrollment, and we are down over 7% now, and of course that has lots of implications, and not the least of which is budget, but more importantly, it has the implication of fewer of our community members are seeking education and to gain economic mobility. And that is a concern for the community as well as the college. So we are really taking a look at some of the more non-traditional ways that we might do outreach and recruitment to increase the number of students of color. And some of those, include, new ideas about going into churches or community groups that serve higher numbers of community members of color or underrepresented community members. Our connections with Vancouver Housing Authority, so we have programming and outreach there. But really thinking more broadly about how can we connect out to our community in new ways, and not to expect that only our official college recruiters are the people who could do that outreach. And so we're really exploring a new direction of sort of everyone is a recruiter, and thinking about what it means when you wear your Clark gear or your Penguin gear. We see the Be the NACCE tool. We really like the name Super Strong, and we like that because it's very bold. So we use that language at Clark, but using the Be the NACCE tool to really help folks who may not have anyone in their life that has higher education, and understand what career aspiration can be and what it can lead to. And just as Julie said, helping them further explore and not just stop with the first thing. It's automotive, if I want to work with my hands, or to not know and just take the AA transfer, as Danny was talking about, which becomes pretty useless if you don't actually transfer. So I don't want to say useless. Let me back that up. Useless only in the respect that it doesn't lead to a terminal degree, right? So your expertise is not in a particular area. But using the Be the NACCE tool, we have, once a student or a potential student enrolls in Clark and pays for their application fee, if they're able. If they're not, we have some other things we can do. But they speak with the entry navigator and enrollment navigator, and they are offered the Super Strong. We do have a lot of folks who think they want to, think they know what they want to take, but we do appreciate the language around affirming a career goal. We also are using those folks who are enrolling and selecting undeclared. We're doing direct outreach and career services, offering the Super Strong, Be the NACCE, and talking to them about the importance of declaring a major, getting on the path quickly, as Guided Pathways is reframing the way we're doing our work. We're really encouraging those folks to make an appointment, come on in and see a career advisor, use Be the NACCE, use other tools. Once you've used the Be the NACCE, how does that help you do further exploration and paying a lot of attention to the folks who, the I don't knows, or I just want to get started, and helping them see that this really is the quickest way to get started, is to get clear on your career goals. So we're trying some new things in terms of recruitment and enrollment, and knowing that the adult re-engagement is maybe the place where we really want to put our focus. We've got strong partnerships with K-12 in our area. We want to continue to build on those partnerships, but really see the adult re-engagement as our opportunity to reach into the community and help further the educational goals and ultimately career goals of folks in our community that we don't typically reach.
Yeah, that's excellent. And I love what you said about everybody being a recruiter, because, you know, from an entrepreneurial, innovative growth mindset, you know, you're overcoming that challenge of you have, you know, each career counselor has over 400 students to be responsible for, and your problem solving together is really great. And I think another thing that you hit on briefly is really the importance of starting earlier and getting into K-12. And I know I had met some people out in California through my interactions with Vita Novice that are doing really some amazing work, you know, prior to students even getting onto our community college campuses or the older students, to give them kind of a leg up. So I think that's great. And I know we have a good slide just looking here a little bit about why interests matter. And I think some of this has been touched on already, but if we kind of go to that, I didn't know if anybody wanted to make a point about that as well, and in terms of as we sort of transition into our next topic. I didn't want to leave it until we maybe, if somebody had a comment or two to make about this slide. Okay, so on that point, I think we've talked about a lot of different things. We're going to shift a little bit to talking about supporting student interest. So Danny, perhaps you could jump in on this one. I know you're doing a lot of good work. We've talked a little bit about this, but I didn't know if you wanted to expand on this a little bit. Okay, so I think what we'll do at this point is we're going to go.
Oh, I apologize, Becky.
Okay.
Sorry,
That's all right.
I was thinking that I was on mute, and I apologize.
Oh, no worries. We'll jump in, and we're glad you're back.
Can we go to the next slide, please? When we were looking around what were going to be our focuses with guided pathways, and I know for many of the people on the webinar, you might be in a similar situation of thinking around where do we start, where do we begin, what is really going to be the focus. And so I wanted to share a little bit around what was the focus here at Lower Columbia. So within our work with guided pathways, one of the things that really kept coming up, and I think this is one of the huge benefits for using Vita Novice, was how are we going to scale it? So, you know, when we looked at what we were doing, and we've done a lot of advising redesign as well, that I won't really get into, but was really around how are we going to acquire enough resources to do the work that we know that we need to do. And I will be realistic and say that you have to use what you have, and you may not have enough. And I think that we're all in those positions. And so when I was really looking at what are the resources, what are the capacities, we kept going back to this, you know, best practice and guiding principles and guided pathways, is that it needs to be very early. All career interventions need to be very early. If we're really wanting to make a difference into how students are selecting their programs, again, it needs to be very early. So we took the approach of requiring all students to complete the Super Strong assessment as part of the onboarding process. And with that, we were able to then scale what our interventions look like. You are going to have students who take the assessment and much like Julie mentioned a little bit earlier, maybe it's affirming what they've already thought that they wanted to go into, and then maybe they feel great about kind of moving forward with that choice. Or we also have a lot of students that are still on that undecided, and as the data shows, we really don't want them to be in that undecided or just think, oh, I'll just do a transfer degree, it'll be fine in the end, right? We really wanted them to be focused around really what are their interests and how does that align with where they want to go. So that, from a capacity standpoint, we've been able to kind of target those deeper interactions, meeting with a career counselor, getting some in-depth career exploration for the students that need it. And you know, the Vita NAVCCE tool allows us to scale this for all of our campus. So instead of it being an opt-in, we require this for all of our students here on campus. And so just real quickly, this kind of really leads into this idea of career advising and how we're structuring it. As I said, we're doing advising redesign at the same time that we're redesigning, you know, career development as well, which allowed us to really put some new things on the table. And so as part of our onboarding process, our campus uses EAB Navigate, which is a student success platform. And so it is guiding students through a lot of steps, one of which is selecting their interest through Vita NAVCCE using the Super Strong. And all of our students now here at Lower Columbia are required to attend a new student advising session. This is with an academic advisor, and it is about 45 minutes. It may seem not like much, but about 10 to 15 minutes of that appointment is dedicated to really discussing their career direction, how this aligns with their program, and really having those conversations around, do you need more guidance? And in that case, they're going to be referred on to a career counselor, or really is this more affirming where you think you would like to go? And so through this process, the last thing I wanted to mention is that we have done a lot of work on training and are really looking, as Julie has mentioned as well earlier, like this idea of aspiration and how does implicit bias, whether it is the bias that students are encountering with, be it within their family or friends or community groups, or, you know, as practitioners, what are the biases that maybe unknowingly we are passing along to our students and kind of tracking them into certain careers. So we've done, you know, the beginning stages of a lot of this work and are very excited about moving forward and moving into that deeper. The last thing that was really important for us was that that whatever we chose as a platform or a tool, that it really aligned with our meta majors and this idea with guided pathways, that we're moving towards, you know, students picking a program and not, you know, allowing this kind of allowing them to be kind of lost in the woods, if you think of it that way, around either being undecided or just kind of choosing something for a reason that isn't. A lot of times we might have students coming in thinking, well, I just want to pick something that will make a lot of money, or you know, whatever the case might be. You know, the classic example is maybe like a student who wants to pick pre-nursing because they think, oh, this is a great salary, but they actually don't enjoy working with people, or are, you know, adverse to blood, or, you know, all the things that you might encounter as a nurse. So that, I think, is a great example that we really wanted to make sure that it was very focused on a pathway and on a career.
Yeah, that's excellent. And I think that alignment is so key. And we've seen that too across the country, that some of our kind of leader colleges really embrace kind of the assessment and some of the areas of focus, definitely, that you pointed out, and then encourage students, because sometimes they look at the results and they're like, I don't know, I'm not sure, is to really kind of, you know, match them up with job shadowing programs. And I know, you know, on future kind of explorations, we're going to be doing more of that. So all of this is really good. So as we go to the next slide and we start to do a little bit deeper dive into, as we've been talking about, guiding principles, and the next slide as well is outreach and recruitment. Let's go back to you, Julie, and I know you've done a lot of really good work, not only on the assessment piece, but pairing that up to just making sure that students are positioned for success. So why don't you share with us a little bit more about that?
Absolutely, thank you. And I think too, when kind of getting back and working on folks on campus, and Becky, you alluded to this before, we don't have as many of our high school students in Washington graduating and going on into higher education. And we definitely found that here at Clover Park that we were not reaching out to our local high schools. And so having the Vita Navis platform, and especially using the Super Strong to go out to the high schools and do this recruitment. And one of the pieces that's really helped with that and looking at honoring the diversity of our communities is having both an English and Spanish version that prospective students can take, the prospective parents of students can kind of be engaged in that conversation. We also finding out that it's helping us kind of introduce new programs and degree options. I think a lot of times there is some stigma, or there's some maybe just stigma around like what a technical college can offer, or even what a two-year community college can offer. And so what we are really enjoying about using the platform integrated into our outreach activities, just increasing the awareness of what we can offer. And what I really also like about the tool is it can show what our local schools offer. So I can have a conversation with a student and it might come up that we don't have a program they offer, but maybe our colleagues over at Pierce College or at Tacoma Community College offer that program. So we can kind of have a holistic conversation with students. And one of the things that I personally really like is kind of interrupting the concept of who attends a technical college and really being able to focus on some of the careers and work that our students are doing in places that they're going. That's been incredibly helpful. So that's kind of where our guiding principles we're going with kind of implementing this into our guided pathways work, but also really with that focus on the outreach and recruitment.
Oh, that's excellent. Yeah, and I think that is really a good way to move forward. And what I find so kind of encouraging about that statistic that you mentioned and people not going on is the opportunity. And I think how you're all embracing doing that. So let's, kind of continue on that. Oh, certainly. Go ahead.
Yeah, could I just jump in here for 1 second?
Of course,
one of the things that I think is an important aspect of recruiting or career decision making is introducing, particularly folks who have articulated or indicated a very clear interest and desire for the technical or for the trades, but then also introducing them to the concept that you could match that with a business degree, because one day you may not want to work for someone else. You could, in fact, start your own business. And even if they do not choose to go on in this particular moment, that seed has been planted for the future. And they may choose to come back at a later date after having gotten some experience in a business, an established business, and then come back and decide, okay, now I'm ready to sort of go out on my own. What are the tools I need? And this is obviously, we've just got a bachelor's in applied science in business management. And so we have some great options for students should they choose to continue or come back for that. And that's the interesting entrepreneurial conversation we can have. And again, because so many of our students or potential students don't have evidence in their life of anybody with a career trajectory. Most of the people in their life have had subsistence jobs when they've had jobs. And so just introducing this idea of stacking credentials and being able to go on and create a life beyond what you ever imagined. So that's one of the things that I like about combining this tool, Vita Navis, with the career advising or an advising appointment, just reminding folks that there's great potential should they choose to engage in that. So thank you.
Yeah, that is so well said. And, there's also, as you all know, working in the field, if you're coming from a family sometimes where there's not that embracing higher education as a priority, there's almost a negative influence for people not to do it, which, you know, we learned about that doing work in Appalachia. And so tools and positive influences like you're describing help counterbalance that. And I'm looking at the clock because I feel like this could be a 2-hour webinar. There's so much good stuff to cover. But let's keep moving because there's a lot we want to share. And let's go into implementation. So let's kind of just dive in and talk a little bit about challenges, which in NACCE language we define as opportunity. So let's hear, Julie, do you want to speak with us a little bit in more depth about College 102 and what you've learned from the pilot?
Absolutely. So College 102, this is a 1-quarter course that all of our new students take. And this is a point where we're kind of extending our career exploration curriculum. And I think it's, you know, incredibly essential that the career exploration doesn't stop once a decision is made. And so while we are not having students take the Super Strong coming in, all students will take it through College 102. And I found what was great is when we had the demo of Vita Navis, I had some of our faculty take the Super Strong and they came back and were like, this is great, I want to have this in my class. So it was a great kind of organic place for this to come up. What's on the screen in front of you, and I'll read a couple of these. I want to honor the time, but this was some feedback from students who used the Vita Navis platform, specifically took the Super Strong as part of this college success class. And in the essence of time, I'll read one of these. So some of them, the results, affirm what I already knew, like healthcare service, medical service, religion and spiritual, counseling and helping. And I'm already in the health field, so I deal with all of them. So they were not a surprise to me. But the rest, sales and office management, were a little surprised because I'm not in the business field. But if I want to choose them as my career, I think I can do it with learning and training. What I liked about this piece is it kind of showed that reflection piece. It was something that a student had have thought of, but it was kind of expanding, oh, but I know I can do this. This is telling me that, hey, I've got some interests that can align with this. And again, having this, and again, we're piloting this. I'm actually training all of our College 102 faculty next week in how to use this assessment, and then the step further to use the student interest survey in responding to that. But we found that this has been a great way to continue that career conversation and also to bring our faculty into those conversations and doing that.
That's excellent. So, Edie, let's go to you. Edie, let's go to you talking about College 101 and kind of the approach that you take.
Sure. So this career development portion of College 101 is consistently named as one of the favorites of the students who take College 101. And let me just back up and say currently, all DTA students are required to take College 101. All other students are encouraged to take College 101. And those students in technical programs where they just couldn't figure out how to get additional credits into their program, they will have to meet College 101 outcomes. And so we see the assignment for College 101 relative to Vita Navis being a wonderful way for we can just hand them an assignment. We've built curriculum already for those folks in prop tech whose students are not going to take College 101. So the students take the Vita Navis, they take the Super Strong, and we have a couple of reflection questions. I won't read those because of time, but you can see that we ask them to identify characteristics and then an interest, and to have identify, like, are there ways that you have lived this particular interest out in your life already? So connecting to them, what they're interested in and what they've already done, and then of course what are next steps to do. So we have several, we have about 8 questions that's part of the whole assignment. So I think I only gave you 1 or 2, but okay, I gave you 2. So then we have them identify career pathways, 1 for each interest. And next slide. Next slide, please. And so then we have them, and here are our areas of study. So we're taking them from interest to career and then directing them directly, or pointing them directly to our areas of study. And then they tell us about how they feel about their confidence in the program that they already selected, right? Because in order to be in this class, they've already selected an area of study and a program. So this is the affirmation or clarity question. So I think that's the last slide for me.
Okay, no, that's great. Again, it's a rich topic, and I know I'm just looking at the time, and I want to give Danny. Yep. I know it's such great stuff to talk about, but Danny, why don't you chime in a little bit and share with us about early career interventions, and because we've covered so much ground. If you wanted to just touch briefly on what you're doing to include all students and scaling, feel free to do that too, because we'll have a little lightning round for our other two guests to maybe just share a minute or so of a closing thought, so we can turn it back to our folks that organized this for any quick questions.
Can I just add, if you have any questions about our College 101 or anything else, I'll be back in the office next week, and please feel free to reach out.
Yeah, so this is Danny. You can see on the slide here, I think we've talked about why choosing a program that is so important, and kind of the reasons behind that, particularly when we're thinking about equity. But if you want to go to the next slide. I want to just briefly, and again, much like Edie, in the interest of time, like if you have any questions about what we're doing, I would love to connect with anyone who has any questions, or today in the chat, or elsewhere over email. But really, I think what was so important when we looked at what we were doing is how do we ensure that this is impacting all students. And so we did make some key decisions to ensure that we included all students. And I think the reason that I want to emphasize this is, particularly when we think about it from a perspective of equity, is that sometimes it's easy to choose, well, we'll start with this group, we'll start with another group. And it's easy to kind of lose the focus of, why are we doing this? If we're doing this for equity and for access, including all students, is incredibly important. And so for us, and in the way that we've designed it, it really has kind of casted a much wider net. And so making it required, it always has its pros and cons, but making it required ensures that students are doing that, and they are getting the support that they need before they have to make the decision. And then just to kind of move into just some kind of closing thoughts, what I really appreciated around, working with my colleagues and thinking about this panel is that we all really took a different approach in where we started. And for those of you, on the webinar and thinking around, what do you do? Where do you start? I can't speak for others, but none of us have a perfect model. We all started where we saw a lot of opportunity. And I think as we are each moving forward, we're moving forward to a place where we're learning from each other. And so that has really been so incredibly rewarding, is to work with colleagues and see, oh, you guys are doing this and you're doing it really well, and we want to do that next. And so regardless of where you're starting, really thinking about, how are you going to scale it? How are you going to include everyone and have the impacts that you would like? And what is the data that you would like to see to help build that case and ensure that you are really on the right track. The one thing that I will say about data is that I think that many times we talk so much about making data-informed decisions, but one thing that I would encourage everyone to think through, and I try to encourage myself as we go through this work, is that it's easy to find data that will confirm where direction you already want to go, or have that confirmation bias. And so it's really important to think about, who are you missing? Who are you missing at the table? I love what Edie shared about engaging your community in a different way. The strategies that we've tried in the past in higher education they've just kind of replicated and confirmed what we've already been doing. And so I think we really need to think about how we can use data about who's not here and who really is missing, and how can we reach them in new and unique ways is so important.
That is beautifully said, and I think it's a nice segue. We're going to give Julie the last word, or a few words, before we turn it back to just touch on any questions. So Julie, do you want to share a little bit about your impact survey, or just a final closing thought for us?
Absolutely, yes. So the student impact survey, actually, I have a class of students taking that today, so I don't have data back on that, but I did have some faculty who are really excited about using that particular tool so we can get feedback. And I think, again, kind of echoing what Danny has said and what Edie has said, the importance of examining why it is what you're doing, making sure that it's accessible, that all students are participating in doing this work. And the idea of continuing to have those conversations about how crucial the career exploration process is, and that it isn't just simply a point in time. It's a developmental process that continues all the way through the careers of our students in doing that. And for folks out there who are contemplating this, who are looking at other ways, if they're working in guided pathways, I can't stress the importance enough of reaching out to colleagues. Both Danny and Edie have been great supports, and I think it's really great to learn from one another, to liberate great ideas when you see them, and to be a little bit fearless in trying things, and knowing your campus well and knowing what's going to work on the ethos of your campus.
That is a wonderful ending, and I think all of our panelists have been very courageous in tackling big problems, but partnering with wonderful colleagues at Vita Novis and other places. So I'm going to turn it back to the organizers, and if we have, I believe, just a minute or two, if there were any final thoughts.
Thank you, Becky. This is Liz Connolly with the Myers-Briggs Company. I am VP of Partnerships for the Innovation Labs team, which is the team behind Vita Novis, and just so excited to hear from Julie and Edie and Danny. You all are doing great things. We don't actually have any questions in the question box for any of the attendees that are still hanging around. If you missed that part in the GoToMeeting panel, there is a little section on the right-hand side to post any questions that you might have. We'll keep the webinar open for a little bit longer if you want to go ahead and type some of those in there. If you have to drop off, that's fine too. Go ahead and answer your question, and we'll respond to you directly. I want to thank everybody for their time, and as I'm talking and saying my thank yous, please feel free to use that time to type in your questions. Thank you to Dr. Corbin. Thank you to Mike. Julie, Danny, Edie, appreciate all of your input today. I think this has been really great stuff. And for all of you who have attended, and I'm looking, most people have stuck around for the full time. You're still on, so thank you. We will be sharing the presentations with all attendees. If you have colleagues that you want to share that with as well, please feel free to, as well as we will share a link to the recording that you can share with your colleagues. And then one final note for those of you who are community colleges and who may be attending the League of Innovations Conference, which coincidentally is being held in Washington State next week. I will be there along with colleagues, so we're happy to connect with you during the conference to give you some more information about Vita Novis, help connect you with Julie and Edie and Danny directly as well. I think our booth number is 112, so please feel free to stop by. Karen, I don't see any questions coming in through the chat box, but we do encourage folks to reach out if you're interested, and we're happy to answer questions either about the platform or to, again, connect you with the panelists today so that you can ask questions about some of the work they're doing on their campuses more specifically. Anything else before we wrap up? Anybody else on the panel?
Nope. Thank you to you, Liz, though, and your colleagues. You guys are awesome to work with, and we appreciate your innovative, collaborative leadership. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Becky. Well, last thing I'll say then to everyone is We will also send out to attendees today an access code to actually go try out Vita Navis and the Super Strong assessment for yourself if you haven't already done so. So look for that in your email. And thank you so much for attending. We really appreciate it. We hope we found this interesting and informative. I know that I did. So thanks everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.